there are people alive today who would have been dead were it not for me. On a certain known day, we were going to have one chance to deliver the beginning of something extraordinary. We didn't have a second chance. You've got to get it right, first time, every time. The more you give, the more you get. The more you trust, the more you're trusted. It absolutely does work. For me, is the magic moment when we can find that because we've made something easier for somebody who is different from ourselves, we've made it easier for them to understand what we're trying to say, we've made it easier for everybody. I see a space in the sorting out the toxic masculinity, of improving communication in everything. I see it about reducing stress by making work easier because everything's simpler and everybody's behaving better.
Every leader has a story to tell, and the Safe Leader podcast uncovers the diversity story behind leading figures championing change to make our world a better place. Join me, your host, Mark McBride-Wright, as we hear from business leaders, academics, entrepreneurs, and agents of change as they share their journeys of innovation, resilience, and transformation. Together, we explore how they embrace the principles of safe leadership, sharing, acting, feeling, and empowering to create safer, more inclusive environments for everyone. Liz Bennett is a Fellow of the Institution of Civil Engineers, a Chartered Health and Safety Professional, and Chair of the Design for Health Task Group. Liz is passionate about simplifying complex challenges to empower others in delivering effective health and safety. Her achievements include serving as Atkins's first group safety manager, co-founding the Survive Group to improve safety on fast roads, and leading Safety in Design, providing free design guides to small practices. As interim head of health and safety for the London 2012 Olympic Games, Liz built safety capabilities across a global workforce, ensuring the success of these iconic events. Currently, Liz leads efforts to enhance health outcomes in construction and delivers impactful training and research, helping shape safer, healthier environments for all. So welcome to a new episode of The Safe Leader. I'm delighted to be joined here today by Liz Bennett, who is the Director of Safety in Design. Liz, thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure, Mark. Absolutely fascinating. So
I think you and I have sort of been virtually connected for a while. We've got a sort of Venn diagram overlap of similar interests. We've got mutual professional, I would say professional colleagues. I'd actually go further and saying professional friends in common, people who we really trust and respect and are connected through them. And I just thought, it'd be really great to get a session in with yourself to find out a bit more about your experience, your work. I remember discovering your work when I got into diversity and inclusion. It was about 10 years ago, and I was reading Stephen Frost's book on inclusion, the inclusion imperative. And it was when I learned about all the amazing work that was done at the London Olympics, and how, it was a games that was to inspire the next generation into sport and leave a legacy within London. So I was really excited to read about the projects that you've worked on, see that that's part of your portfolio, and would love to talk a bit about that today, the projects you've done in the past, what you're working on now, and where to start. There's so much.
Well,
What sparked your interest in safety? Tell us a bit about you, about your background. And
it's a long story, really, but I'll try and cut it short because I can talk for hours and hours, as people who know me will attest. So I actually, when I was at school, I didn't know what I wanted to do, like I think most people. I would
Yep.
say, most people. No idea. And you only really know what your parents do or those close to you and around. And I wasn't very keen on following their route. So I did double maths and physics A level, largely because I was very good at maths and absolutely adored my physics teacher, who I found a brilliant communicator with
Okay.
my kind of brain. She explained why it was important to know things, and I needed that background. Maths, if you can do it and you enjoy problem solving, becomes an easy thing. So double maths A level was a great joy. So 2 weeks before the A level exams, we were all playing cards. And the first year six was saying, well, wish we had A levels in 2 weeks' time so that we could play cards too. We kind of said, well, if you don't understand it on the journey through, you'll be lost. So we've done the hard work, we've got the stuff, and now we can relax and play cards. So I kind of did double maths and physics because I found it absolutely fascinating, loved it, wanted to go into astronomy, put off by a teacher. Didn't know what to do, really didn't know. And the A levels are coming out, something, we had to fill in forms to say this is the beginning of the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And I thought, gosh, I need a gap year. But I'm terribly old, and gap years weren't really a thing that people did. It was a thing that was coming in.
Right.
It wasn't really the norm then. What I should have done, with hindsight, is go and just get a job.
Right.
Anywhere, in a shop or anything. Just get a job, take a breath and a bit of a gap between that particular atmosphere of school and the real world outside the school gates. And I decided that I really wanted to work with people, and I wanted to be a nurse.
Ooh, very, very different then.
Very different.
Yeah.
But I have aunts and uncles who are doctors and nurses and this, that and the other. And the advice I was getting from all the women who were nurses, the men are the doctors, was, no, you'll be deeply frustrated because the most junior doctor will be senior to the most senior nurse, and you'll find it very frustrating. So I made a mistake, and I applied for medicine when I didn't want to be a doctor.
Oh. Yeah.
Now, we add into that mix that I have a gentle overlay or inlay or something of ADHD.
Okay.
And I have absolutely appalling short-term memory, unless I'm really vested in something and really engaged and it's a problem-solving thing.
Mhm.
Medicine, it turns out your toe bone is connected to your foot bone, and your foot bone is connected to your ankle bone, and you've just got to learn it,
Right.
So I was scoring, I think my highest mark in an exam at medical school, I did 2 years there, my highest mark was 97%, and my lowest mark they didn't bother to tell me because I'd written the worst paper they'd ever marked.
Oh, right. Wow.
In biochemistry. So I left with enormous relief. Yeah, but I'd done 2 years of medicine, and I kind of knew where the bits were.
Right.
I didn't necessarily know what they were called, but I knew roughly what they were supposed to do, and found it really, really interesting. Used to do dissection on a Saturday morning because it was fascinating. And I went to Manchester, which is my home university, my home city, and I went on the first day of term, and I said to the porter, I'd like to do civil engineering. Now, why did I choose civil engineering? Because I used to get a lift to school with a gentleman who lived opposite, who ended up being Dean of the School of Engineering at Manchester. So,
Oh, wow.
a lovely guy. And so he, I suppose, extended my pool of these are things you could do.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I think if I'd been a boy, it would have been an obvious choice for me. But it wasn't something that my school knew about. So they knew about law and medicine and teaching, and that was about it, really.
Interesting.
Anyway, So tutor was brilliant, and he said, "Oh, when do you want to start?" And I said, "Oh, today." And he said, "I'll just give the admissions tutor a call." So he did. He was free. I had an interview. Just need a reference. Got one. Started that day. And I loved it because it's about problem solving, and it did use lots of maths. And again, made mistakes. Followed the crowd to be interested in geotechnics when really I was interested in hydraulics.
Right.
I loved the patterns and shapes of what fluids do, and I love the fact that you can model those mathematically.
Of course.
And then you do something. You put a rock in or a breakwater in, and everything changes. You know, you might be surprised by it, or you might kind of be delighted because you get what you predict. Anyway, did that. Lovely. Went off and got a job. Worked as a consultant first, then I worked for Costains. Best year of my life, on site with Costains up and down the Thames.
Oh, cool.
Why the best year? Because of the people.
Right.
Always, for me, it's always about the people. Worst years of my life because of the people. Yeah. Best year of my life. So then got married, moved house, couldn't get a job, couldn't stay in engineering, did a bit of work, this and that, bit of drafting work. Thought, do you know what? I don't want to be a teacher, but both my parents are teachers, my brother's a teacher, and in those days, close your ears students, as a mature student, I got an enormous grant that more than paid the mortgage on the house.
Oh, wow. Gosh. Wow.
So I did it.
Very attractive. Yeah, of course.
I did it.
Of course.
Right? Because we lived in a tiny village in South Wales, which was lovely. So small it didn't even have a pub, which is very small.
Wow.
And I was a bit bored. So I went to Swansea University and did teaching. So now if you put that together, a couple of years of medicine, chartered engineer, qualified to teach, has done some teaching at Ulster School and so on, and another Welsh-speaking school where I ended up teaching Latin, which was a bit surreal. Put that together, yeah, and then we moved back to Surrey area, and I'm looking for work, proper work now. Yeah, doing a bit of editing for Macmillan's, doing a bit of writing for Macmillan's Education, doing bits and bobs, doing part-time teaching even, which was great fun. But the family needed the income from a second thing, and I went back to Costains because I'd been so happy there.
Fantastic.
I'm chartered, but I can't run a project for you because my husband works for Shell and he's all over the place, and we've got 3 small children and so on and so on. So I want to do something that's more office-based. So I went to talk to the head of training. I just asked, can I have an hour of your time? And he said, yes, of course. And it had been suggested to me that health and safety might be interesting.
Yeah.
What happens in health and safety, there's a lot of roughly know what the bits of the body are about, yeah?
Yeah. I see where this is going.
Know what the process is about, the practical side stuff and the design side of stuff, yeah? And be able to teach it and explain it to people. And it was like, you know, music,
perfect fit, yeah.
Hearts, beautiful sparkly lights and everything.
Yeah.
Won the jackpot. So Costains took me on and trained me. And that's really what happened. And I was really, really lucky because, again, the people were extraordinary. And I learned a huge amount and loved it and felt as though I was in the right place for me. So
and with Costain, was it in that role that you then worked on some of these big projects? Like No. So with Costains, I was part of the team looking at, supporting the business on projects. You go onto a project and you say what's wrong. So it's internal audit, you know. Right.
What was interesting, I said, I don't want to just turn up on a project and tell them what's wrong. I want to go on a project and find out why things are still not as they should be.
Yes.
And it was only one of my colleagues had the courage to let me go on one of his projects. I went on 2 jobs, one the A3 Milford bypass and one, I think it was the 339 Basingstoke bypass, but I've never been able to find that one since, so I might have got the number wrong. I do remember the HSE's head regional office was at the end of our site,
Hmm.
which became quite important when we
Yeah.
pulled out a high voltage cable and knocked their power supply off just
Oh
before.
no, what a story.
Yeah. But Costain said to me, we can't afford to pay you, but you ought to be being paid more. So
Wow.
my head of department encouraged me to apply for jobs elsewhere.
Wow. Look at
So
that foresight. That's
yeah,
incredible. People
yeah,
really looking out for you.
really, really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
But and do you know what? I think this sort of karma thing, I think it is true, isn't it? The more you give, the more you get.
Mm. Hmm.
The more you trust, the more you're trusted. It
Yeah.
absolutely does work. I don't know if you'd
I,
agree with that and
I
share.
do. I do. It's something it goes through my mind as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. When you have an idea or you have a inclination of something that could work, you think, right, I need to develop it and then keep it. And then, try and find a way to sell it and win work and then do the big unveil and what have you. But it in my time of doing some investment in myself and also my team for the business in other service providers, what I've found, we did some training on social media, and I always remember the guy who we used had this really interesting take, is that people who want to do things on a shoestring and on a budget, give them the stuff and then they can go away and do it. But what you want is the people that are time poor and they want the expert to help them do it. And that's where you can then be paid for the higher value work, the coaching, the consulting, the training, the time coming in to spend time in the business with the business, doing stuff. But to get to that point, you have to give stuff away, which is exactly what you just said. It's give, 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 and then you build. So withholding how you do stuff, obviously not giving away trade secrets, or not that there's anything extra special about, well, downselling what we do. I like to think we've got some uniqueness, but it's not like we've got intellectual property on some complicated tech software or something, or some pharmaceutical drug. You can't give away the things that are the secret sauce to your business, but you can certainly be generous with your insights, with your time, with how you make people feel, the experience that they have through working with you. And if there's ways that you can package up what you offer, it's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, actually, The Safe Leader, because I felt like my brain was going to explode a bit. I'd done so much development, training to hundreds of engineers, people working in engineering, consultancy, working with institutions, with projects, with employers, with universities, like seeing future pipelines, seeing engineers that have retired, engineers that are returning back to STEM, all these like inputs, and then still getting frustrated with a lack of EDI in STEM, or the culture really shifting. And then on the other side, seeing the disengagement from the male majority, and discovering the suicide rates in engineering and construction, manufacturing, just really frustrated me as a safety engineer. We wouldn't tolerate these sort of rates elsewhere. So anyway, my brain felt like spaghetti. I've learned that phrase once on a training course. It's like combing spaghetti. That's what I felt like. And I started doing some public speaking training, coming up with keynote speeches and delivering them on stage, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't satiating. It wasn't scratching that itch that I'd had.
Yeah.
And it was when my coach said to me, she was like, Mark, you're at the stage now where you need to write the book. You need to write a book. And I was like, oh, okay. So all that storytelling work was helpful, because it helped me like write some of the chapters and give some structure to the case studies. But my goodness, when I'd finished writing the book, it was actually when I recorded the audiobook that I still need to publish on Amazon, on Audible, but it is ready. But when I recorded the audiobook, I had to have a couple of months separation from doing the final manuscript to then doing the audiobook, because I was too close to it. But that is when I feel like I use the phrase, I feel like I've taken a chip out my brain. I know it's now there. It's here. It's not very long, but I can come back to this. I'm not going to forget it. I feel like I've created space, mental space, to now grow and think creatively about how to build on the concepts in here. And part of the reasons why I've started this podcast is to meet with other subject matter experts like yourself, figure out where there's areas of overlap, how we can really better serve the communities that we support. And my business, Equal Engineers, it's grown so big in its own right, in terms of there's so much stuff that the business does, that I'm now needing to carve out my own professional identity, separate but still linked to that, as Mark McBride-Wright, the safe leader, whatever that's going to look like in the years to come. But all coming back to this same point about building community between minoritized groups, but in a way that engages the majority of the profession. And how do we use safety to communicate ED&I, culture, belonging? I find it fascinating. I really do find it fascinating.
So can I sort of feed back some of what I've heard there, just sort of high-level stuff, that actually writing the book, writing it down,
yes,
in a place that you can come back to and other people can look at in their time, has given you the headspace to go and do the next thing?
Yes, absolutely. Hand on heart. There's a story in the book that links to my kids, and it links to a story that I use in my talk, one of my keynotes, and it talks about my son, the metaphor of a butterfly, and then how like boxes start to get put on young boys, and like what they can be and what they should be, and when does toxic masculinity set in. And it made me reflect on my role as a father, and am I being the best father I could be, and blah blah blah. So it was quite emotional writing some of that. And what I love about the book is that it's there, and my kids will look at it in years to come. It's logged. It's logged there. It's got an ISBN number. It's there. It's forever in time. It will be there as part of history. And my kids are mentioned in the foreword. Like, in fact, it's dedicated to them, I think. So they love seeing their names in the front of the book. So, but yeah, to your point, it really helped me clear space mentally to then, I'm really enjoying this creativity now,
It's almost actually like writing a to-do list, because instead of it going round and round in your head, you've captured it, so now you can not worry about it anymore.
Absolutely.
It's there. You can come back to it when you need to. So your book was your ideas and thoughts and creative progress on this, and you've written that down, and what you do with that, and where you take it, and the next stages in the next book, or whatever it is an evolution of that, and you can use it as a springboard instead of it still being part of that spaghetti.
Do you know what's weird? It's weird when I found it really strange when, obviously, like, friends and family bought the book to support me, and people that I'd shared the manuscript with to get input on, they were familiar with what I was writing. But it was when people who I don't know who they are, I've never met them before, started sending me messages or meeting me at an event, and then were relaying back to me things that are in the book. It's weird. It felt fictitious. I'm like, how do you know that? Even though I've written a book and put it out there, like the fact that people are able to order something from their computer, it arrives then at their door, and it's something that I've written, and then the knowledge transfer, they've read it, and then they're saying the concepts back to me, and I'm like, totally, of course I agree with it, because I wrote it. But it's just, I remember I had that moment Arup kindly hosted a book launch for me at their fancy new offices in London, and it was some of the people who came to that it had been a few months the book had been out, and then we were talking about concepts in the book, and it was my first moment as an author, like having an interaction with people who I do not know them,
Yeah.
And we were talking about, you know, the stuff that I'm passionate about. You know, I think you've written some stuff as well, haven't you? You've written
Oh,
some
not
reports.
books.
No,
Oh, I've
but
done bits and bobs. Yeah.
bits and
I
bobs.
find it difficult to sit. Well, I don't know if I need to get in the flow, and I'm just always so busy doing stuff, like sitting around thinking about what I'm going to do next, and then thinking about it a bit more, and then
What's
writing.
your what's your so talk me a bit through then about the work you're doing. So you gave us a history of getting to where you
Yeah.
are now. You've been running your independent consultancy for a number of years now. Like what brought you to do safety and design, and what are some of the projects that you work on throughout? What joy do you get from doing what you do now?
Mm. So, yeah, I can do that. Sorry, I'm doing a little bit of technical stuff here because my emails are all on and they're squeaking to me. I'm very sorry.
Distracting.
Distracting. I'm very good at being distracted. So, well, I joined Costain's health and safety team because of CDM. So CDM was on the horizon, and Derek, my boss at the time, was saying, "You're exactly the sort of person we need in the team," because up until then it was mainly people going into health and safety, maybe coming out of, I don't know, it wasn't seen as a professional discipline. It was
Yeah.
more a site safety officer kind of thing across construction, and it was changing so fast. And
Do you want to do you want to just give us an update? I know what you're talking about because I used to
CDM,
it, but can you just give for our listeners like a bit of
yeah,
an
of course I
overlay
can.
of the evolution
But,
of practice and what CDM means and what it meant for
yeah,
industry?
so when I started in the construction industry, when a contractor signed up to be able to deliver a project, they signed up that they were taking all risks. So all commercial risks, all safety risks, all health risks, although we hardly talked about health. Um, and you know, you're going to do this job for this price, ish. I generalise enormously, of course. But what the view, the emerging theories were, was that a lot of times designers were designing things that were difficult and sometimes dangerous
Right.
to construct for all sorts of reasons, often because they didn't really understand the construction process. They didn't have enough experience of being there in horizontal sleet, you know, trying to make something fit that had been ordered and not come to site according to the order. Right, so this general view that if we pulled it back to designers, they could design things being mindful of how to construct them and how to maintain them and how to use them as a workplace. We've come to these places. What's happened, we've had 3 iterations of CDM now, and the current
Right.
version, CDM 2015, has taken that responsibility back to the client as well, because
Yes.
what the HSE has looked at is the principal contractor for many decades has had to plan, manage, monitor and coordinate the construction work, and they've been king of the construction phase. So far so good, and they're actually, when they're doing their job well, doing a jolly good job. Yeah. Our industry is amazing. We deliver absolutely superb projects brilliantly a lot of the time. So they said, could we copy that into a pre-construction duty holder,
Mm.
called the principal designer, or principal contractor, principal designer, whose job will be to coordinate this huge amount of information that's floating around between the client's ambition to change their asset into something new, different, reduced, expanded, whatever it is, change their asset in some way. Could we bring all of that thinking into one place and make it the responsibility of the principal designer? So that's what they've tried to do with the latest regulations.
Yeah.
And then they've looked at the client and they've said in some sectors the client takes an interest in and a responsibility for health and safety, typically for commercial reasons. Yeah, Yeah, if you blow up your oil rig, you're not producing oil.
Yeah.
Probably not a very sensible thing to do, but so on and so on. So lots of the stuff coming from DuPont's safety theory and so on and so on was feeding into this. And it's like, if we therefore make clients take an interest by giving them statutory criminal duties and liabilities, maybe they, through their contracts and their performance requirements of their supply chain, will require better standards, where we, who don't have the resources and the detailed knowledge, don't have that opportunity. Really, that's what CDM is about. Now, if we take that and we look at the front end, which was the kind of new stuff, I'd done this site stuff with Costains, and I loved it, and I still love Costains, Costains, wherever you are, you can do very little wrong. They're like family, they're just lovely. So, but this space of design is actually about ideas and thoughts and options and specifications and stuff. On site, if the scaffold's a bit dodgy, you can usually see it. It wobbles, things aren't straight, it doesn't look right, probably isn't right. Yeah, that trench isn't supported, get it supported. But if there's an idea that's not really supported, it's very easy for it to carry on floating around in that space and get taken forward. And so I've become really interested in the whole information space and the communication of information, the absorption of it from complex different sources, the management of it, the dealing with it, and the communication of it. When it's harder to pin down, it's herding cats, it's putting fog in a box, it's all of those things. Yeah. It's much harder to pin down. And so what we tend to get is lots and lots and lots and lots and then lots more checks and balances on it. Did you read it? Yeah. Well, not very well actually, but well, I nearly read it, but I'll sign it anyway. Yeah, but it's been signed, so I'm happy you've signed off and taken responsibility. I'm not really as interested in who's got the liability if something goes wrong. I'm more interested in who's doing things in creative ways to inform others so that things don't go wrong in the first place.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in simple. Right? No comments, please.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, life is too complex or complicated as it is, so anything simple is the best way.
It's also, I think somebody terribly famous said it takes an expert to simplify things, so I just hang on to that. Right, but I do think we what's my word I'm looking for? I've lost the word. Complicate things.
We do.
And we've got far too much information for people to manage. So if you've got too much, you can't deal with it. You can't say, we import into our projects uncertainty. But if the information is too much, too little, right, wrong, accurate, sufficient, whatever. We've got lots of, I'm calling the elephants in the room, but we've got a herd of elephants that makes it really surprising that we ever deliver anything at all. Because we've got skills shortages, we've got information challenges, we've got different kinds of people, we've got all sorts of pressures. I think when we talk about every project being unique, for me it's about the different stakeholders in the project. They're always different. If you've got different people in different organisations prodding at stuff, or the government changing their mind about whether something's going to go ahead or not, when you moved your family, invested everything about who you are and what you are in a project that's then suddenly cancelled or maybe cancelled or is put on ice, it makes life very challenging and very stressful. So I see a space in the sorting out the toxic masculinity, the this, that, and the other, of improving communication in everything. I see it about reducing stress by making work easier because everything's simpler and everybody's behaving better. I mean, it's not a pink and fluffy world. It does happen. It happened for me at Costains. Great people with great expertise, behaving in a great way. dreadful crack, awful teasing, yeah, but it was fantastic. Now, it wouldn't have been fantastic for everybody, but it just worked, right? So, so I think there's the interest in the design and interest in the communication has grown and grown and grown from that. And then I had an interesting experience. So some years ago, on the back of CDM, a friend of mine now, so one of these, he is a friend, but I think we need a new word for people who are friends / professional colleagues, but probably when you retire, you might not stay in touch with them. There's a new word needed there. But anyway, Hash, I will stay in touch with. He has retired. We do talk to each other. Hash Matra, who was an HSE specialist inspector, based in the Northwest, when CDM 2007 came in, identified that designers didn't really know what CDM, what these health and safety regulations were asking of them.
Yeah.
Design things that are safe to build, safe to maintain, and so on. So he wrote to the presidents of the design institutions and said, send me a volunteer. And I happened to be chair of the Institution of Civil Engineers Health and Safety Board at the time. So I joined in. Right, and stayed for years working with them. And when HSE funding went, Hash said, well, do you look after these design guides and keep them freely available for people?
Right.
We knew that I would, and I didn't need a board decision for it. So they're on our website, and
that's what I meant. That's what I knew. You'd written stuff. You're making me question my thing.
No, it's team. It's collaboration, Mark. It's all of the collaboration of people.
Okay, fine.
Right?
I know.
Enjoying making a difference. That's what it's about. Yeah. So we did this. We did it for years, and there was this wonderful guy, Tim Goff, who was vice president of REBA for small practices, so the Royal Institute of British Architects, small practices. And he said, look, he said, this is all wrong. He said, if you say work at height to an architect, and given that falls from height's usually the biggest cause of accidental death on construction, work at height is an issue. If you say work at height to an architect, they will glaze over and say it's the contractor's responsibility. But if you say the design of an atrium to an architect, they'll want to know where and how high and what it is and what if there are any design, they'll get really engaged with it.
Right.
So the access vocabulary is important, and the vocabulary of the guide is important.
Yeah.
Now that made me think a lot, because we have this kind of jokey structural engineers and architects don't get on. Brains work in different ways. I mean, they do get on, of course they get on, but they do think in very different ways.
Yeah.
So that's been sitting there sort of brewing away. We said to Tim, go and write a guide for architects then. So he did, and he came back, and we all read it. We're all engineers and stuff. We all read it. We thought, what on earth is this silly, fluffy stuff? You give it to an architect, and they said, oh, at last, thank goodness, somebody understands our world. Now, if we've got such a discontinuity of communication because people's brains work differently, what's that going to do in terms of the missing of that communication? And so that really started. I mean, what we did in the end is we got somebody whose job it is to wordsmith things, to write them all in a better. And we're reviewing the front end stuff at the moment. But that was really interesting. And I think I would say that that's part of my interest in the Equitable Safety Initiative and the work that we're doing now. Is if we can be if I use that analogy of the design guides, if we can be the wordsmithers that make the language common for everybody, then everybody can understand what everybody's talking about and what everybody's communicating, right, and stuff.
You mentioned
we do it though.
Yeah, you mentioned the Equitable Safety Initiative when we were planning this chat together. Can you tell us a bit more about that, and how fresh is it? What's the
so fresh
ambition for it?
It's not been baked yet.
Oh right. Okay.
So yeah, we're still mixing in currants and sultanas and
What flavour it's going to be?
lashing the brandy. Right. So right, what is it? So it's basically construction health and safety meets equality, diversity, and inclusion.
Awesome.
So it's, I think, let's say health, safety, and well-being. Let's put that in the space as well.
Okay.
So I'm going to describe a pilot project that we're doing because we're leading on that. But the main project is being led by the absolutely amazing Jenny McLaughlin from Heathrow Airport, who I know you know.
Absolutely.
And I know you also think is utterly amazing.
She is. Force of good in this world. Need more Jennies.
Very big force of good, absolutely marvellous woman. Right, so she's looking after the whole project, and she, with Heathrow's supply chain, are working on designing places and spaces for people, recognising that we all have a different response to place and space.
Yes.
Now that's quite interesting because it's echoing some work that Bylaw, the Bouygues Lang O'Rourke joint venture at Hinkley Point C, is doing, looking at accommodation and the design of places and spaces for people who are far from home, who are working on a site, difficult and dangerous and challenging, work all day, and then they need to relax.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you relax? Do you go and have a drink? Do you go and play loud music? Or do you want to sit quietly and read a book? Can we have all of those happening at the same time? Is the space the right? Can we, put special... I don't know. I'm not really familiar with the detail of what they're doing there.
Okay.
But I know that it absolutely chimes to the whole of Lang O'Rourke, certainly, and they're taking it across their business.
Wow.
Looking at site offices and everything. Are we designing them? And are we just saying, here's a box, it keeps the weather off, here's a phone, get on with it? Yeah. Or are we saying, you're going to spend a lot of time here, let's make it as pleasant a place as possible so that you can be relaxed and good as you need to be to do this difficult job. Anyway, so that's all going on. But the deaf pilot, we're looking at, can you be deaf and work in our industry? Absolutely you can. There are lots of very senior deaf people working in our industry. Yeah. Can you be deafened and work in our industry? Absolutely you can. Our industry deafens lots of people. Right? There are lots of people who are hard of hearing. Do we have situations in our industry where we can't hear? All the time. Lots of places. Too loud, we've got hearing, we're in a complicated space, we're, this, that and the other. We're looking at all of that. If you want to take somebody to work in your office who's got a hearing problem, what could you do to make their life easier for them, right? How could you make them feel part of the team? Because if they don't feel part of the team, then the consequences of that for everybody are really negative and can spiral down really quite quickly, quite badly. So we're working with ITV Signpost because they specialise in that. And best interest, I have a profoundly deaf son who happens to work for ITV Signpost.
Oh, right? Fantastic.
So we've got some of what we're doing is stuff in BSL, British Sign Language, by deaf people, for deaf, deaf enabled, let's say.
Yeah.
So it's sort of being able to celebrate the deaf culture and say, yes, there's a place here for you. And there's an amazing architect whose name I've forgotten, who's profoundly deaf and who works in London and says, do you know, architecture is a great career for deaf people? Because all our synapses, if you're deafened from birth, have reconnected, and visually we're extra acute.
Oh, interesting.
Interesting. Yeah. So we're looking at that, and it's really interesting because I've been talking to a lovely lady, Anne. I can't remember her name. It's just gone. I've just been emailing her all afternoon since I finished, and I'm so excited talking to you, Mark, and it's gone. This is an ADHD moment. It's not because I'm old. I've been like this all my life. So there we go. But so looking at she's an amazing architectural graduate, right? She went blind when she was 17 and then studied architecture.
Wow.
Not completely blind. She's got some peripheral vision, but she's registered to blind. And she is utterly amazing.
Fabulous.
Utterly amazing. So now what we're doing with her and what she's helping us with is, okay, so deaf people can't hear. So everything that we're communicating needs to be focused on the visual. Right? Visual, visual, visual. Pictures, videos, films, words. Fabulous. Hi. Oh, you can't see. Well, that's not going to work very well, right? Now, then we go on to, oh, you've got dyslexia. You don't like words. You're happy with the pictures and the films and the stuff. So we're looking at, and we're trying to ask ourselves questions. Are we trying to look for a one-size-fits-all? Or is that very foolish? There isn't one size. Should we actually be communicating in lots of different ways? Be interesting. So I'll tell you a little tiny story. One of my grandsons, when he was at junior school, a fantastic teacher came in and gave them a questionnaire about how they learned. So showed them videos. They did all sorts of different teaching styles and then gave them a questionnaire and said, I want to know how each of you learns best so that I can use those methods to help you.
Interesting. Whoa. Wow.
Really good.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe we should be asking, how do people communicate best, hear best, read best, take on information best?
Yeah.
And is that a rich smorgasbord of communication? Now, it kind of feels friendly and okay if we're talking to construction workers on a construction site, maybe reading is a bit of a problem for them. So blooming patronising. Yeah? So blooming patronising. Absolutely appalling. And actually, it turns out that you can run a multi-million-pound business, a multi-billion-pound business, and be dyslexic. So
yeah, of course.
Dyslexic doesn't mean stupid. Having ADHD doesn't mean stupid. Being deaf or blind doesn't mean stupid. Please let's look at the can-dos, not the can't-dos.
I'm still on your grandson. What did he put down in terms of how he liked to learn?
Well, you'll have to ask him.
I'm going to try that on my son. Maybe it'll be a way to get engagement in doing homework.
The homework's pretty limited. You've got to do this, So,
yeah, true.
But I do think it's, it is quite interesting. If I were at home taking this call on the phone, I would be walking round and round and round the room.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When I was being diagnosed for ADHD, they said, do you fidget? And I said, I don't know. Do I fidget? And she said, well, why are you shaking? And I said, well, I'm just tapping my foot on the floor. She said, that's called fidgeting. But what I'm saying is, I would be able to engage in the conversation better if I was moving about.
I see.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, like how we've learned. I learned about stimming, releasing excess energy when you need to focus. It's something I've learned about through this journey into neurodiversity, and learning about this emerging identity that we're only starting to learn more about in the last 5-10 years, really. Certainly more happening now. And I think it's fascinating. And what the lovely thing that to your point about what you're doing on those projects, and with the Equitable Safety Initiative, is you're bringing diversity of opportunity to engage, because actually hearing, reading, seeing, listening, smelling, touching, sensing, having a multisensorial experience of communicating information increases the likelihood that it will stick and it'll retain. So even if you've got your primary mode of how you take something in, if it's then also being reinforced through other methods, everyone benefits from it, and that's the
Yeah.
whole crux of it, isn't it?
It's partly that, but it's also partly the famous tin opener story. You know, that people who had arthritis in their hands were finding gripping a tin opener to open a tin really almost impossible.
Yep.
So people got to and designed a tin opener that people with arthritic hands could use, and it turns out that we all found it easier
Yeah.
to use. We all use it now.
Yeah.
Right? So that for me is the magic moment when we can find that because we've made something easier for somebody who is different from ourselves, we've made it easier for them to understand what we're trying to say, we've made it easier for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's very important, very, very important to, one of the challenges that you mentioned is, skills attraction and skills retention. So if we can bring more people in, open up and be attractive as an industry to more from a wider range of people, then hopefully we'll not have any skills gaps or close that.
I mean, it's such a fascinating industry. It's quite frustrating not to be able to share that with people.
Absolutely, and hopefully we don't have, or we're making improvement with educators on who can work in STEM, who can work in engineering and construction. I want to do some quick fire questions with you now, if that's all right. So, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Ooh. So, best piece of advice.
Yes.
At a low point in my life, I explosively said I'm never going to trust anybody again. And my tutor from Manchester University, with whom I stayed friends, said, you have to trust or you won't be trusted.
Mm-hmm.
And I said that earlier on in the conversation, and I'd just been thinking about that in terms of, we were talking earlier about sharing information and giving out information. I find I'm really lucky because we need to shout about health and safety from the rooftops, but in ways that people can engage with. So I feel I don't need to be confidential about it. Because I am in my own business, I can give away stuff. So people who come on a safety and design course for principal designers or whatever, which is most of what I spend my time doing, I'll give them away PowerPoint slides if they're going to come on and learn to be, learn how to develop a CDM course that they're going to go on and sell. I'm very happy to help them to do that. I might be a bit aggrieved for a minute when they're terribly successful at doing it. There's nothing like finding something that you've been saying for years coming back to meet you, and you kind of think, yep.
Very true. What's your favorite safety innovation or tool that's made a difference in your work?
See, I have to be honest here that Mark has given me this list just before our conversation, so I've had a minute to think about this. Safety innovation or tool? I'm actually going to say that it's nothing new. I'm going to say very firmly, I'm going to come back to its people and its collaboration. And for me, that always is the winning thing. Yeah? Working together with generosity of spirit.
What's the one thing you do to unwind after a long day?
Go and talk to my hens.
What's your proudest professional accomplishment?
Now, this might surprise you a bit. Changing the way the public behaves when their cars break down on the fast road network.
Oh, interesting.
Within a 3-year time span from start to seeing some changes reported. And that's a project called Survive, Safe Use of Roadside Verges in Vehicular Emergencies.
Oh, wow. That is
And
a good acronym.
yeah, yeah, it was great. How did we do that?
Yeah.
The need was clearly there. An AA operative and an RAC operative had both been killed on the hard shoulder of motorways. And I worked with the AA and RAC to look at their procedures, their training, their systems, and this, that, and the other. And I said there needs to be an industry-wide group looking at this. And I think I'm quite lucky or something or other that I seem to know when the time is right to do something. And they said, right, let's do it. And so I had director level support from AA and RAC to do this. So they brought in the associate chief constable from Devon and Cornwall, who headed up the Association of Chief Police Officers Traffic Group. We worked with National Highways, who'd got a contract with Transport Research Laboratory. We worked with the police right across the country. We worked with the HSE, and we got Sir Peter Baldwin as our chair, who's the chap who set up the Department of Transport, and I absolutely loved working for him.
Wow.
Really clever man and really lovely to work for. So we did that, and I was the technical secretary for that, and I wrote the report, but the information we gathered was great. We did a questionnaire for everybody who left the motorway via the hard shoulder, so got onto the hard shoulder or crossed it because there was an accident or something or other. And we honed that questionnaire. So I think some of us wrote an Aunt Sally for it, a basic document, and then we asked others to input, and the HSE put some extra questions in and different questions, and then we asked the police to collect the data, and then all the data went to Transport Research Laboratory, and National Highways funded that research, and so we got some evidence base for our decision making. And that group still works, is still going today.
Wow.
The reason, and this was a bit of a unique reason, the reason that we could change the way the public behaved is that we could work with academics internationally, we could work with everybody, but in terms of the controllers of that environment and the people whom we call, if there's an emergency, we the travelling public, it's either the emergency services through 999 or it's vehicle recovery sector. Mm-hmm. So we had the vehicle recovery trade associations and the tyre changing associations and so on, a big community. So do you see? It's people collaborating, common intent.
Yeah.
And we explained how to park, and we explained to the public that the motorways are our safest roads, but if you have to stop, then you are at risk of heavy vehicles drifting onto the hard shoulder and hitting you.
Yeah.
So I'm in a very unusual position as a health and safety professional. There are people alive today who would have been dead were it not for me, and I could identify them because they've had a breakdown. They've done what they were told by everybody. Everybody had the same simple message. If it's safe to get out of your car, do so. If it's safe to get over the barrier, look out in case you're on a bridge or there's a steep bank or something. But if it's safe to get over the barrier behind your car, then do it.
Yeah.
And, that was just being quoted back to me today.
Amazing.
So
Amazing. If you could have dinner with any design or safety expert, who would it be?
Well, I just did.
You just did?
I just did. So a couple of weeks ago, I had lunch. Will that do? Dinner's far too late. I had lunch with Hash Matra, who started those design guides, and another friend of mine from Atkins days, when I was head of health and safety at Atkins, David Thomas, who left Atkins. He said it was my fault he got into health and safety. Left Atkins to join the HSE as well, and they live near each other, and they became very good friends up in the northwest. And when David left the HSE, he went to work for a contractor for a while to discover what contracting was like, and then he became secretary of the Temporary Works Forum. And Temporary Works temporary works design and temporary works in general had always been the poor relation in construction. So this is things like scaffolding and support for structures. And, it's like it's the contractor's responsibility. You've got to sort that out. And yet it's often crucial because temporary works often interacts with and interferes with permanent works.
Right.
And so there's a strong imperative to take a shortcut or leave something out. And we've had some horrible disasters as a result. So Dave and Ash, and then a lovely chap I've met through the Equitable Safety Initiative, Tim Evans, who's a director for Amy Consulting, rail side, who does in-house training for Amy Consulting staff, at least, on CDM. We agreed to meet, and because I'm sharing, I've told E002 what we were doing, and E002's told ACOM, and Hash used to work for ACOM as a regional director after the HSE, so on and so on. We met at my brother's house up near Manchester Airport for lunch, and it was really lovely, and you'll understand this, sitting with a bunch of people who understand the complexities and frustrations of something that they know is really worthwhile and has taken up large chunks of their life and been very rewarding. But we turned out to be a bunch of old fogies in some way. Oh, everybody should have spent some time on site. Oh, back in my day you had to do that. But we have a plan, and we're developing some designer-specific training.
Fabulous.
Because it's about design, not about health and safety. It's about design that, of course, needs to be safe to build, and of course, needs to be safe to maintain, and of course, isn't going to harm people's health. So
absolutely. Tea or coffee?
Both. Depends on the time of day, obviously.
What's one book, podcast, or resource you'd recommend to someone in safety or design?
No-brainer. The Get It Right initiative.
Okay. What?
You familiar with it?
I've heard of it, yes.
You need to go and look at it. And every designer and every client ought to read the design guide on it. It's brilliantly communicated, very clear, very simple, very succinct, and absolutely nails it. And it's about reducing error.
Yes, GIRI, I have heard of it. Yeah, the GIRI, yeah. So the Get It Right initiative. We'll put the link to that in the show notes. What's the most exciting project you've worked on?
Oh, it's got to be the Olympics, hasn't it? London 2012. So now here's the thing that's interesting about London 2012. Lots has been written about the lessons from London 2012, but they're almost entirely from the Olympic Delivery Authority.
Yes.
Because LOCOG, where I was a private business and had no imperative to do any reports on lessons learned.
Okay.
No, the Olympic Delivery Authority did.
Right.
So, but one of the key lessons for me, a really big plus from LOCOG, and well, ODA as well, but from LOCOG in particular, was that on a certain known day, we were going to have one chance to deliver the beginning of something extraordinary. Right? We didn't have a second chance.
No.
There was no going around and snagging stuff. You've got to get it right, first time, every time. And here is the day it starts, and here is the day it finishes. And to get to that place and deliver that extraordinary, we've got to work together. So all sorts of different people from all over the world came with all sorts of different experiences, but we all had that guiding understanding of, we know what we've got to do. And I think that's something that other projects could learn from.
Yeah.
Having that, what do we want to achieve here? We all want it to work. Nobody's going into a project saying, I don't mind if I kill a couple of people on this project.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And nobody's trying to be the weak link. We all want it to work, so let's all make it work together.
Very good advice. And on that, if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
this is my younger self who studied civil engineering. Yeah, that would be go and work for a contractor first.
Right.
Because the contractors inherit all the mistakes of everybody else, and they've got to deal with them and get on with them. So in a sense, a contractor is perhaps closest to the low-cog model of, we've got this, we've got to make something of it, we've got to deliver it, and we've got to do it as quickly as we reasonably can, given all the constraints on us. And I think it teaches you so much about yourself, about people, about communication, about good and bad, and sometimes quite ugly. And I think then go back into the design piece and would be what I would say. And if it was before that, I don't think I decided what I wanted to be till I was about 37.
Never too old to get that self-discovery.
Yeah.
Well, Liz, I've really enjoyed chatting with you today. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time and your insights. If people want to get in touch with you and find out more about your work, how can they make contact?
They can go to our website or they can email me. So maybe you can add those links.
I will absolutely put them in the show notes. Do you want to just say the link for the website there?
So I'm Liz Bennett. My email is liz@safetyindesign.org.uk.
Fabulous. And the website is?
And the website is safetyindesign.org.uk. And we've got a LinkedIn presence, and so have I as well. So that's another useful thing, because I do get about 1 million emails a day.
Fabulous. So look you up on LinkedIn, connect in there. Link will be in the show. Links plural will be in the show notes.
Great. Be great.
Thank you very much.
Please, we'll talk again.
Absolutely. Of course we will. We'll stay in touch. Have a great day. Thanks.
You take care.
Bye.
My hens have gone to bed.
You have been listening to the Safe Leader podcast, uncovering the diversity story behind leading figures championing change to make our world a better place. If you have enjoyed the episode, please subscribe to the Safe Leader podcast on your podcast platform of choice and get notified when a new episode goes live. Did you know that we also offer a full transcript on each of our podcast episodes? Check out my website, McBride-Wright.com. Here, you can also explore the training, coaching, and keynote speaking services I offer. And whilst you're there, why not join the Safe Leader community by subscribing to the Safe Leader Insights mailing list? Thank you for listening, and please come back and join us on a future episode.